some part of. I'm gonna keep this secret. I'm gonna close my body now.
Hello ladies and gentlemen, Nick here, and welcome to my ranking of the Pierce Brosnan James Bond films. So I'll be ranking my least favourite to favourite James Bond films starring Pierce Brosnan as James Bond. Now this one's a controversial era due to the fact that these, again, like with Roger Moore's films, some of them aren't particularly liked for one reason or another. Some people don't think the stories are very good. Some people think there's too much action and CGI or gadgetry and machine guns and not enough plot. Or at least in favour of good plots and storylines. Personally, I disagree. I think they're great films. Well, three of them at least. Great films. Some of the best in one's case anyway. Just normal Bond films, basically. I mean, it's the 90s and early 2000s, so the style will be different from 60s, 70s, 80s, and also the later 2000s, 2010s, and hopefully upcoming 2020s. So, style's a bit different, but I can totally understand why some people wouldn't be so keen on them. But personally, this is one of my favourite eras of Bonds. Brosnan was for a while my favourite Bond until Timothy Dalton overtook him, and that was short after him already being my favourite, and that was already after I considered him the best actor for the role. For a while before that, sorry Connery and Craig fans. But yeah, Brosnan era, still really highly enjoyable, and some really great stuff in here. Sorry, Brosnan dislikers, but I am a Brosnan era fan. And yeah, I mean, I will admit there is one film here that is not very good. I will admit that. But the other three, well, two of them are underrated gems, and one of them is one of the best films of the entire series. One of my favourite films of all time. So let's begin with the 4 films from the Pierce Brosnan era. Just list them off. GoldenEye, Tomorrow Never Dies, The World Is Not Enough, and Die Another Day. So, let's get started with number 4, and I think a lot of people, I think the majority of the fan base would consider this the weakest Pierce Brosnan film. And I have to agree. Number 4 is Die Another Day. Brosnan's fourth and final Bond film. The 4 films for Bonds don't seem to be doing that well, apart from arguably Daniel Craig. Personally, I think, well, Spectre is in my bottom half of the Craig ranking at the moment. Compared to his, at the moment, Spectre is in his bottom half ranking, but it's stronger than the other Bond films, other Bond actors' 4 films for Connery, Moore, and Brosnan. Die Another Day is also Brosnan's final Bond film, and it kind of leaves on a weak note. I have to say it's probably my least favourite of the it's probably my least favourite of the final Bond films for an actor. I'll be doing a full ranking after No Time to Die comes out, so in April or May. But spoiler for that ranking, this one's probably going to be last. Currently, yeah. I think it starts off well with Korea, Bond being captured in Korea. It starts off well, starts off typical Brosnan era Bond, starts off pretty well, interesting enough, starts off really good. But after he leaves Korea, after he's released, things start to go downhill, the plot gets a bit questionable, things get a bit muddled. I still think the first hour is pretty good, still pretty basic Bond, still pretty interesting. I think the story goes downhill in the second hour, though, when we get to Iceland. I think once we get to Iceland, it goes full Moonraker mode and just becomes an absolute confused of what it wants to be. And it might have already been that earlier on, but it was still doing it at a fairly reasonable, typical Bond pace, to be honest, for me anyway. But once we get to Iceland, things get a bit mad, and like I said, the plot gets really confused. Trying to be like, it's like a Moonraker. It's a very it's a bit like a parody. It gets a bit too sci-fi for Bond, more than Moonraker, and it's just all over the place. It's trying to be a bit too comedic, which doesn't really feel that well, go that well with the more seriousness that was in with the capture in North Korea, which I think represented the times well enough. But yeah, the film just doesn't know what it wants to be, and I think the problem is it's a post 9/11 film. It's in a post 9/11 world, but it's still trying to be typical James Bond. It's not even typical James Bond. It's actually trying to go back to Roger Moore era James Bond, at least ones like Moonraker and Golden Gun. And I hate to say this, but also Octopussy. And that one succeeds more in being a more serious Cold War film than this one does, being a serious. I wouldn't say post 9/11 film because it was in pre-production at least before 9/11 happened, maybe a little into production, but definitely a post-Cold War film. And the problems that's affected countries like Russia, China, and or in Russia, China's case, post-British colonial, Middle East Asia, and Korea. And I think it's trying to do stuff like that, but once it starts going down this other direction, when we go to Cuba, when we go back to the UK, and especially when we go to Iceland, and then back to Korea, it's just a bit of a jumbled mess. It doesn't know what it's wanting to be. I actually think the acting's pretty fair throughout. I mean, I can understand people's problems with Halle Berry and Toby Stephens. Personally, with Toby Stephens, I think he's camp enough to be a lot of fun. He's better than Stromberg, or at least better than Kurt Gurgis in his role. I mean, the character's not that amazing. Good twist though, but not as good as the twist as with a villain in the previous film. But a decent twist. Halle Berry, I think she's okay, but I can understand why lots of people don't like her as Jinx. And unlike Paris Carver and Dr. Christmas Jones, she is in quite a lot of the film, as opposed to parts of the film, or only or like Paris, or reserved to the second hour, like Christmas. And even then, you get breaks from her from time to time. Here she get a bit of a big break between for the London stuff, but she's very important to the second hour, and she's definitely getting almost a co-star credit here. She's very sorry, I'm moving my books. Co-starry credit here, almost position here, and a big fuss about her because she just won an Oscar for Monsters Ball, which I have not seen, but I'll take it as I presume her role was Oscar worthy because she won an Oscar. Although she did win a Razzie 2 years later for Catwoman, which I have seen. Enjoy it at the time, but if I watched it now, I probably wouldn't like it because it was a few years ago. Actually, we got the DVD, so a rewatch would be in order. And also, we got some of the worst CGI in the entire series. If it's not terrible rear background projection, it's terrible CGI. With these films, the effects, you get lots of great effects in the Bond series, but you'll get, and also some great rear projection, but then you'll get some dodgy rear projection and some dodgy CGI, and we've got a lot of terrible CGI here. Also, some very terrible editing with lots of sped up and lots of slowed down shots. I think the editing in Thunderball and Quantum of Solace is worse. Quantum of Solace is the worst one, Thunderball next, then this one, and then all the others. Difficult to rank all the others because most of them are very similar, but or at least for their times. But as for individuals, certainly this one would be the third worst edited. I mean, nothing tops Quantum of Solace. You can barely tell what's going on in that film, especially in the action scenes. And Thunderball, either too damn slow or too damn fast. And we do get a bit of that here, but it's not all the time. Well, almost all the time, like with Thunderball or Quantum. Mainly in action scenes, but also in location stuff. But it does calm down in other places, so it's not terrible all the way through like those other two almost are. And yeah, I think there are some good moments, good stuff throughout this. Brosnan's probably got his weakest performance, but he does one last good job in the role. Judi Dench is amazing as M, as always. Also Colin Salmon as Robinson. Not Miranda Frost. Yeah, it is Miranda Frost, played by Rosamund Pike. Brilliant character, brilliant performance. I actually don't mind not Mr. Kill, Zhao. I actually kind of enjoy Zhao and his scenes. Although it's a bit strange that they got an American to play a Korean, but oh well. Actually, they did the same with Colonel Moon before he turned into Toby Stephens. Well, I guess or maybe those Koreans trained at him, or maybe they were Korean actors who trained in America. actually, the guy who plays Colonel Moon before he transforms into Toby Sims actually appears in the Wolverine, which is set in Japan. He's playing a Japanese character there. That was actually quite interesting. And the car is amazing. I don't care what anybody says. I don't mind it being invisible. It's not as, I mean, it's just as believable as being submersible with the spider, like in the Spider on Me. I mean, I don't get why people don't like it being invisible, but they don't mind the Lotus being submersible. There's got to be some reason. There's a difference between opinions because they're very similar in terms of concept. Or at least both of them are a bit. Both of which bend the rules of reality and realism. Yeah, realism, suspension of disbelief. They bend that, but lots of people love the Lotus despite it being submersible, and lots of people hate the Vanquish because it's invisible, submersible, invisible. Personally, I think they're both great cars, and their features are great, and I actually don't mind it being invisible. For this film, it kind of makes sense. It works because of the tone it's going. Yeah, it probably would be stupid normally, but for this particular film's tone and concept, yeah, it kind of works. And like I said, I don't mind. Also, the car, without the invisibility mode, is one of the best cars of the series. Without that invisibility mode, I think that's what gets lots of people down, and it gets a lot of frowned upon because of that. But the car itself is beautiful. It's a very beautiful car. I also love the Lotus. I thought that was great. But I also love the Aston Martin Vanquish. It looks lovely. It looks like a very modern, that's of 2002 car comparison to the Aston Martin DB5. Similarly, the DB10 does a similar thing for a modern 2015 Aston Martin variant compared to the DB5. Of course, the DB5 is the best car and always will be, and it's a timeless classic. But for modern updates, I think they the Vanquish and also the DB10 Inspector, and also I think I'm not sure what it's called, but the one in Living Daylights, which is coming back for No Time to Die, for the 80s as well. They work really well. But okay, Die Another Day. I've talked enough about that. I sort of do like it a little bit, but to be honest, I do like all of them. Even Quantum of Solace, which is my least favourite, and 4 out of 10. Even that and the Casino Royale 54 one, I like them all. Some more than others, obviously. But yeah, Die Another Day definitely is the weakest Pierce Brosnan film and one of the weakest in the series. I wouldn't say it's the worst one for me, but it's definitely one of the weaker ones. And like I said when talking about Moonraker in my Roger Moore ranking, this is the one that's usually considered the worst by fans, although casual audiences would go for Moonraker usually. Number 3. Number 3 is a film that I don't think is that much more popular, but it's usually considered at least a bit better. Or at least doesn't get as much hatred as Die Another Day. This one actually has a pretty good plot and some really good stuff. It does have probably the one that most people would point to when having problems with the Brosnan era, unless they were talking about Die Another Day as their least favourite film. But for typical Brosnan era stuff, they probably point to this one. But personally, I've always enjoyed this one. I think it's a good film, got some really great stuff. Tomorrow Never Dies. Considering this film was made before the handover of Hong Kong from the UK to China, I think the fact that they're doing a World War aversion film between Britain and China, having to prevent World War III breaking up between the two countries, a la You Only Live Twice between the United States and Russia, happening. I will say the villain, Elliot Carver, although he is a deliciously great villain with a deliciously great performance by Jonathan Pryce, his motive sucks. At least, I mean, okay, his motive works with his character, but as the main driving force behind his plan, kind of sucks. Just broadcast rights in China for the next 100 years. That's his motive. I mean, he wants to be seen all around the world by everybody. He wants to reach everybody. But It was also surprising it was only China who said no to it. I'm sure a couple of other countries would probably say no, but okay. But yeah, that's his only motivation, that and to broadcast the war, I guess. But yeah, I think his motivation should have been stronger. He should have had more to get out of it. Maybe more, at least have General Chang give him some honorary position. Maybe have him also get a Nobel Peace Prize. Well, not peace. Chang's getting that, or would have gotten that. A Nobel Prize for services to media, perhaps. Yeah, that would have been a good motive. But sadly, bad motive. But the character is great. I love him as a villain. It's just his motivation. He's also got my favourite blonde, muscled henchman, who is not Red Grant, of the series, and that is Stamper. He's my second favourite blonde, muscular henchman to a Bond villain after Red Grant. He is just really fun, really enjoyable. Some great lines, some great moments. And I like how it's him that Bond has the final fight with. Great moments with killing off Carver, although there could have been a bit more to it, but it was fine, it was good. The other henchmen don't get an awful lot to do. Mr. Gupta doesn't really get an awful lot. His notable moments were actually cut from the film. And as far as great as Dr. Kaufman was, and the actor playing him, he was only on screen for a few minutes and then he was gone, which is a disappointment because he was a very fantastic addition to the film. And like I said, Paris Carver, not really the best character, but she's not on screen for long. Much better female lead character in this film is Wei Lin, played by Michelle Yeoh, and she is brilliant. With all the talks of a Jinx spin-off after Die Another Day, I wouldn't have minded Wei Lin having her own spin-off film or coming back in that film as they were discussing. Great character. Wouldn't mind a spin-off. In fact, maybe the two of them could have teamed up. China and America. How well do you think that would have gotten along? But anyway, yeah, Wei Lin, brilliant character, really, really great character. And also some really other great stuff. The car's great. Q is great, and that's a great scene. And I'm disappointed that joke about the Jaguar was cut. That would have been that was a great joke. The Jaguar quote, Jaguar line, that was great. Great stuff from Judi Dench because she continues. Great first film for Robinson. Some great effects in here. I think there's better effects in this film than there is in the next film in some places. David Arnold's score is amazing. It did take me a little bit of a while to warmth to it a bit more. Pre-title scene is an epic way to get yourself invested into the story, and the pre-title scene is a great way to set the tone of the movie and, in fact, the era, so to speak. And yeah, I just think this is a great film. It's got some really great moments, some really enjoyable stuff. It's more of an action film than a spy thriller, but it does have quite a bit of spy thrillery stuff in there. Not to mention, it's not just all action. There is, like Skyfall and For Your Eyes Only, there is times to calm down. There is times between the action stuff where they get to have some character moments, which is something I feel Quantum of Solace didn't do. Moonraker didn't do very well. I think they were very in a rush to get to the next action scenes. Well, Tomorrow Never Dies, I actually think it slows down in places to give audiences breaks. Yeah, sometimes there's a couple of action scenes that are not too far behind the other ones, but I think after then you got some quieter moments to calm yourself down a little bit. So, yeah. As for Die Another Day, yeah, there are a couple of quiet moments, but not as much. I think Tomorrow Never Dies is a bit more calmer in those quiet moments. You get some nice moments, like with Bond and Wei Lin on the boat when they're sailing off towards the stealth boat. When they're on their way to it, they get to have a nice. There's a nice scene or two with them just talking. It's quite nice. It's quite calm and relaxing before we get to the climax, or at least the start of the climax. Anyway, so. Yeah, Tomorrow Never Dies. I think it's a great film. I think it's also an underrated gem. But even more of an underrated gem is my number 2 choice. The World Is Not Enough.
The world is not enough, but it is such a perfect place to start, my love. And if you're strong enough to
one in my third films of a Bond actor's ranking. And yeah, I think this is Brosnan's best performance. Apart from the bit where he's talking to Elektra after coming back from facing Renard. But apart from that one bit, fantastic performance throughout the film. Not one of the best like Connery's in Goldfinger or Craig's in Skyfall, but certainly a strong performance and definitely his best in the series. Well, actually, maybe he is one of the best in the series. Well, not number one or number two, but up there, top 10 at least. Also his James Bond delivery is a bit Americanized. It would be a great bit if it was not Americanized. I don't know why. But yeah, great stuff. Great villain. I won't say who, because if you haven't seen the film, twist. Go watch it. But the villain we think it's going to be, Renard, he's a great character. The real villain is great. Sophie Marceau is Electra King. The oil heiress Bond sent to protect. She's actually she's a really good character. There's a lot of backstory behind her and emotional backstory. And like not Anya, Kara from Living Daylights, there seems to be some genuine romantic chemistry between the two characters, although not as much as Tracy or Vesper, or dare I say Madeline. Actually, maybe considering how much character growth Madeline got, maybe actually she is in the Kara Electra camp, to be honest. At least a Spectre. We'll see about No Time to Die. But certainly not as much as Tracy or Vesper, but certainly along the same lines as Kara and Spectre Madeline, although they were trying to big her up as the next love interest, a la Vesper and Tracy. But I think in Spectre, at least, she's more on the lines of Electra and Kara. Maybe No Time to Die will up hit a bit. Anyway, like I said, Denise Richards' Christmas Jones. Well, she brings a lot of fun and laughable moment. Well, she certainly makes the audience laugh. She certainly gives us some laughable moments, and like with the Darth Vader, fun things to laugh at and parody and say, even though we all know deep down, just no. But thankfully, she's only in the second half, so it's not awful. And also, there are some bits where she does skip out. What else? Robbie Coltrane, back as Valentine Scosti, gets even more to do in this film. Could have had even more, but oh well. And also, it could have been Tomorrow Never Dies, but he wasn't in it. They were going to have a version of the film where he was in it, and then they changed it and he wasn't. But yeah, I think he was great here. Really great. Other great supporting characters, great supporting cast. I really enjoyed the plot. I thought it was a really great film. Some great action as well, some great moments. And I don't think this one overdid it as much as maybe Tomorrow Never Dies or Die Another Day. And CGI, I think, is a little bit worse in some places than Tomorrow Never Dies. The bit with the Renard head, that's fine, that's great. But with the helicopter disc thingies, that does look noticeably CG'd, and I think Tomorrow Never Dies did some of it better. Not Die Another Day, no. Casino Royale does. Quantum does. Oh, God, I said something positive about Quantum Solace. In fact, I said something positive about my least favourite film when I'm talking about one of my top 10 films. Surprise, surprise. Which I know a lot of people disagree with me with, but still, Skyfall and Spectre definitely have better CGI than this. But yeah, oh well, late 90s, I suppose. Even GoldenEye has a little bit better. But yeah, well done enough. I think this is an underrated gem, more so than Tomorrow Never Dies, and it is in my top 10 ranking at the moment. Again, No Time to Die could just about knock it down to number 11. Which I actually do want that to happen, because I want No Time to Die to be one of the best films of the series. Especially if we're going to send off Daniel Craig in a great manner, so I actually wouldn't mind this one going down from 10 to 11. But we'll see what happens with No Time to Die. That one might be the next one down. We'll see. Could be the worst one. Oh God, I hope that doesn't happen. Anyway, moving on to number 1. Now, this one's one of my favourite films of all time. Not number 1 of all time. There's another film from this series that takes that spot, and I talked about that in my third films ranking, and I'll get back to that with my Daniel Craig ranking. But this one is one of my favourite films of all time, and my second favourite film of this series, and it's my favourite first film for a Bond actor. You all know what this is. GoldenEye.
See him surface and every shadow on the wind I feel his breath. GoldenEye, I found his weakness. GoldenEye, he'll do what I please. GoldenEye, no time for sweetness, but a bitter kiss will bring him to his knees.
GoldenEye is amazing. I know some people don't like it, to be honest. Yeah, I can understand why, but for me, I just love this film. Fantastic plot, great performance from Brosnan. Like Roger Moore, he's off to a great start with his performance, and Dalton, and even Connery and Craig in their first films. Not Lazenby though. But yeah, great start. He gets better as he goes along, apart from Die Another Day, which is a bit of a step down, but still. Could be his weakest of the four performances, but he's still off to a great start. Great Bond villain in the form of... No, I'm not going to spoil it. No, go and watch the film. Go and watch the film. I'm not going to spoil it for you. If you want me to spoil it for you, go and watch my reviews. But I recommend watching the films. But great villain. Great Bond woman with Natalia Samolova. She's great. She's a strong female character from the 90s, and also a colourful collection of hench villains who honestly could be three of the best ones of all time. Xenia Onatopp certainly is. Brilliant femme fatale character. Brilliant post-Cold War film. Great storyline. Some really great stuff. Great actions. Great directing. Looks around just brilliant, and some really good CGI as well in places. The only really thing that isn't very good about this film is the score by Eric Serra, but I probably like it more than most people. Serra and Marvin Helmish from Spy Who Loved Me are two of my least favourite composers, and the scores for those two films are two of my least favourite. I think my least favourite is Dr. No's. There isn't really much of a score there, and what there is either very typical 60s or music, or typical 60s music that John Barry would do better with some of his scores. So I think Dr. No and Monty Norman are my least favourite score and composer respectively, even though Monty Norman wrote the James Bond theme, though it was Barry who composed it. Then it's joint between Helmish and Serra with their Spy and GoldenEye scores, and then it's everybody else, the other composers and the other soundtracks. But yeah. But besides that, I think GoldenEye is a fantastic film and just works on so many levels, and it brought Bond back to for the 90s and for the post-Cold War era, and like Spy, brought it back out of a difficult time. Yes, I know they kind of did put it back into a smaller difficult time, but Casino Royale, directed by Martin Campbell, who also directs GoldenEye, managed to bring the series back from that troublesome era. So you can always count on Martin Campbell, unless you want him to direct Quantum of Solace, in which case you can't. Even then, I think he probably wouldn't have saved that film. Well, actually, he might have. Well, he would have made it better, but he wouldn't have saved it. Actually, he could have saved that film, to be honest. I was thinking maybe he couldn't, but he might have been able to salvage it. It would have at least been his Diamonds Are Forever, which means it's not one of his best, but at least it's good. Unlike what it actually turned out to be. But anyway, that's Daniel Craig era. We can talk about that then. But Brosnan era, best film, easily GoldenEye for me. And it's one of my favourites of the series. So to wrap up this ranking, number 4 is Die Another Day, which is everybody's least favourite Brosnan film, to my knowledge. I mean, it's usually considered the worst of the series by fans, and is generally lower lower on rankings, and generally despised. So I wouldn't be surprised if it was the unanimous least favourite Brosnan film. Then again, that doesn't mean GoldenEye is the unanimous favourite Brosnan film. I know some people actually prefer Tomorrow Never Dies to GoldenEye. But yeah, anyway, number 3, Tomorrow Never Dies. Anyway, number 3, Tomorrow Never Dies. Number 2, The World's Not Enough. And number 1, GoldenEye. Look into my GoldenEye. Anyway, so that's it from me. Thank you for watching. That's the end of these James Bond rankings for release. I've still got some to record, but they should already be out by now until No Time to Die is released. But as far as the pre-No Time to Die ones are concerned, this is the last one to go out, and then the rest will come post No Time to Die with my Daniel Craig films ranking, final film for a Bond actor ranking, and the overall 2 or 3, maybe 4-part overall ranking. That's it from me. Thank you for watching. I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye. Don't forget to click below to subscribe to the official Nicholas Payne Retro YouTube channel. Excuse me. Finally, you wanted you to do that before we started. So let's get down to this list with the 4 films from the Pierce Brosnan era. So let's get down with the 4. Brosnan's fourth film is also his final film, and although I won't be doing my final film ranking until No Time to Die comes out, I probably will have to spoil. And whilst I won't be, hairs end up in my tongue, or fibres. And yeah, and also terrible CGI in places. I mean, the wind. So yeah. Oh, dang, I may as well not bothered with the charger. Oh, bugger. Yeah, as I've already talked about this in my my favourite film. I know some people don't like it, and to be honest, I feel this. And to be honest, I feel the same way about Spy Who Loved Me. I mean, okay, some people probably like GoldenEye less than I forgot it. Some people may not like it, which is, and also a couple of, or at least 1 or 2 of them, or at least Xenia on top could be. Great plot. It's a great plot. Brilliant use of the Cold War, or typical 60s that John Barry does better in later films, and Barry does a fantastic. How many scores? 11, I think. 11 fantastic scores. Yeah, John Barry did 11 fantastic scores. Well, mostly fantastic in the weaker one's case. And all music that it would have been at least Golden Gun, Diamonds Are Forever, Guy Hamilton. It would have at least been his Diamonds Are Forever, Golden Gun film for here. It would have at least been his Man with Golden Gun or Diamonds Are Forever, or not Moonraker. It's minus the comedy, meaning that it's not terribly great, but could have been better under his direction. Anyway, which